Alright guys, what's up? In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to play every spot on T-side Vertigo. Before I start today's video, I want to thank you guys for 2,000 subscribers. Just to think that I only hit 1,000 subscribers only a few weeks ago, it's pretty incredible how this channel has grown. And don't expect me to stop making videos. I'm going to keep making videos for a long time, trying to help out the community in any way that I can. Now that I'm not playing anymore, I have a lot of knowledge to share down with you. So if you want to see more videos that are similar to this, make sure you're subscribed for the future and leave a like on this video. It lets me know that you like this type of content. Before I continue this video, here's a quick word from our sponsor. CSGO Big is a site where you can play your favorite games like case battles, roulette, coin flip, jackpot, and even open cases on their site. You can deposit using my affiliate code ONEBIRD, and you get a bonus when you deposit in CSGO skins, crypto, gift cards, and credit card. You can withdraw with CSGO skins or crypto, whichever one you prefer. Make sure you head to the link in my description and use the code ONEBIRD for deposit bonus when you sign up. Okay, back to the video. Before I start talking about Vertigo, I want to address why my mollies look like this. A lot of people in the comments ask me why they don't look normal, and it's because I have this command enabled. It's R CSGO effects bloom false. This is a cheat command. So if you want to use this in your practice server, it's really helpful because this bloom trail isn't as, wide and annoying. And same thing with the mollies, it makes it a little less annoying to look at. And going forward, I'm going to include my practice config in the description of every video that I make in a practice server so that you can do the same. It's really easy. You just make a file in this file path and then load up any map. So I'm on Vertigo, and then I would type exec prac, just like this, and it'll boot you up into a practice server where you can full buy and throw nades and no clip and do all that stuff. Alright, let's get into the video. So coming out of spawn here, I just want to outline the 5 most standard roles on a normal default. And if you don't know what a default is, it's just the round where you're not really having a set plan in mind, but you're just kind of seeing what's going on and, not to say autopilot, but you're just kind of figuring out how the round is going to go based on really standard and easy plays that you can make on basically any round. And so the 5 roles are the B Lurk, the mid player, the A rifle, the Awper, and then the float player. And I'll explain the float player last because it's not that it's more complicated, it's just a role that kind of goes in between. And if you're structuring your open team or your 5-stack based on these roles, I would say the B Lurk should be your player who likes to be the main lurker on your team. The mid player should be your secondary lurk player. The A rifler is your typical pack player. Your Awper is going to be playing with the op, and you as the IGL should be the float player because you're the one who's kind of running around and seeing what's going on, finding information, and being more dynamic and running around the map. Since most people play Mirage, I'm going to translate the Mirage roles in case you don't understand what I mean by main lurk and secondary lurk. So on Mirage, your main lurker plays in Palace or towards A ramp because that role is very split from your team, and it's very hard to link up unless the entire team comes around your way or the lurker takes a very long path to link up with your team. So that's your main lurker. He's going to be the player who plays solo most of the time. Your secondary lurker is somebody who plays in apps, and that's because your secondary lurker is more likely to link up with you into the round. And I only say this because the way that the B lurker plays, although he's very close to A, it's just kind of what I've seen as like the role translation within teams. It kind of works out the best to have the main lurker play B. Your A rifler on a Mirage T side would be the rifle who really likes to go mid most of the rounds, and you as the IGL are similar in that float position. You're going to be playing mid on most of the rounds on T side, and your Awper is obviously your Awper. Okay, so that's what I mean when I say translating the roles between different maps. If you're going to structure your team, do it in this way. Okay, so since this is my first guide talking about T sides, I'm going to be linking back to this video when I do full map guides because this is a concept that will spread on every single map regardless, and it's the philosophy of a T side in general. Okay, so let's think about the game of Counter-Strike and its rule set. And I'm not trying to lose you guys here. This is really basic. You're going to understand it, okay? So when we think about Counter-Strike, if neither team does anything, the rules of the game say that CTs will always win on time, okay? If the Ts don't make an approach and do something, the CTs will always win. That's very obvious, very basic, right? It's like rule number 1. So that means the Ts have to make an advance somewhere on the map to do something. Okay, so this is like my 4th time recording this because I didn't really like how I said it in the previous tries, so let's try it again. This lesson I'm giving you here is very fundamental, and that's why I've picked this fake map. and this is obviously not a real map, but it helps to have a more simple map layout to explain this, because if I tried to explain this on a full map all at once, it might get a little too complicated and it won't settle with you, and it'll be hard to learn from that. So I'm going to do it like this. So let's say you're a T side, and on your T side, all 5 players, and you can think of just you as playing all 5 players in this example. Let's say in this example, you decide that your team is just going to sit around kind of behind these lines and not take anything on the entire map, right? You're just going to sit here. What this allows the CTs to do is to move into these areas, and let's say that they want to take B site, right? Let's say that they want to play down in here, okay? Because you let them. As a T side, you didn't push anything past this line here. So now the CTs are able to take all this control, right? So since there's 5 players on each team, that means that the CTs can play 3 players towards this side of the map, because they know that this side of the map is completely clear. And I'll draw a box here or something, right? It's a bomb, say you're playing Counter-Strike, so there's a bunch of stuff that they can do and play around boxes and things, right? So they can play in unexpected positions where it's hard to kill them, right? Okay, so now what you have to realize is that these things take time out of the round. So from the beginning of the round, let's say that the CTs use some utility, they block this part off, maybe they blocked off here or something, right, with like a Molotov or a smoke, and let's say, they might have smoked like deep, so you're locked behind the lines that you started with, correct? Okay, so now this is how the map looks for the T's, right? This is a big question mark, and you know that the other team has taken this control. So since the rounds passed maybe 30, 45 seconds, you're now sitting at around 110 to 105, right? Again, this is very general. Now you have much less time to go to where you want to go, which are the bomb sites, right? You have to plant the bomb or kill all 5 CTs to win the round as a T, right? You can't just do nothing. The CTs are always going to win. So now as a T side, you have to make a decision. Do we go into this unknown area where there's a lot of corners, people could be playing in stuff like this, they could be playing angles to fall back, it's much more unclear? Or do we take the long range where there's less angles to clear, but we might be going into a stacked bomb site, okay? And this is if the T's do nothing. Now I want you to imagine that at the start of the round, the T's actually contest for this part of the map. So right, you throw a smoke here, a few players throw maybe a smoke here, or maybe a molly to push the CTs back. And so now the round might look something like this. And the reason I'm saying this is because Counter-Strike is a game of information. You want the CTs to not ever know exactly what you're going to do, or if they do know what you're going to do, it's going to be too late for them to react in a way that's going to counter you, okay? And so by pushing the CTs back towards the bomb site, or, forcing this guy to not know which way he wants to go, right? He doesn't know if it's going to be A or B. Now you have a better chance at winning the round, because this player isn't going to help at A necessarily, right? He doesn't know if it's going to be A. He can't set up a good crossfire, or B. And so this is one of the reasons why maps like Anubis are T-sided, and it's kind of an anomaly. All the other maps are pretty balanced, or they're slightly CT-sided. On Anubis, you're able to push the CTs back into essentially what is the bomb site, and in areas where they can't really get much action without dying alone, okay? And obviously this isn't an Anubis guide. I'm talking about Vertigo in this video, but if you're coming back from a future video, maybe the Anubis video, this is why Anubis is T-sided, because you're able to do this very effectively, versus on all the other maps you can do it somewhat effectively, and there's a lot of risk involved, and you're not going to have a perfect round every single time. Okay, I hope this made sense with this visual aid. T-sides are much harder to play than CT sides, where you can kind of be individualistic. T sides, you kind of have to do these things across the map, and it's not always going to work out in the way that you want, especially if you're not 5Q'd or you're not playing with a lot of experienced players who haven't internalized this through experience. They didn't necessarily need somebody to tell them this outright, but they've learned it through experience, and some people might not even be able to articulate it. They just kind of know this automatically. Alright, now that we've kind of done our fundamental theorem of calculus on Counter-Strike, now welcome to the map, okay? What I'm going to try to do is outline this kind of example on the whole map. I'm going to show you why you do certain things, and why it's better for, let's say, your lurker to take space here, or your team to take space together here, or your mid player to, gain some information here, that kind of stuff, okay? And so that's the general T-side theory kind of over, and so if you're coming from another video, you can go back to that one. Okay, so before I talk about the role-specific responsibilities in each round, I'm going to show you from a map-down perspective the kinds of executes that are very, very, very common on Vertigo, okay? So starting at A site, let's think about our example, right? How are we going to get into the bomb site? Well, looking at the radar, yes, you do have two paths into A, but they both funnel into one opening right here at the bomb site. So you can kind of think of A executes, when you want to take A site, as all kind of being from the same direction, okay? If you've played enough Vertigo, you know it's pretty hard to get into elevator and flank A, so it's really not common. But in, 3 versus 3s where the CTs can't really hold everything, it's more common. But let's make it more simple. And with 5 players live on both teams, it's not more simple, but more simple in theory, right? You can't really do that. So you kind of have to execute all from A, all right? Which means that you need to have control of the ramp and to some degree have a player ready for side haul, okay? So you can all kind of link together and move as a group. Now let's talk about B. B has 2 entrances. There's one from an easier flank to get, and there's obviously the B main area. And so what you see is you see 2 types of executes versus 1 at A site coming in on B site. So you have straight B executes where you're coming all from one direction. So it's going to be hard to execute the full bomb site from mid. So that's going to be from the B stairs. And then you have a B split where you have multiple people coming from both directions to kind of pincer the bomb site and shift the focus of the CTs to not be able to just focus on one lane. They have to focus on 2. So it becomes exponentially harder for the CTs to hold if you're able to surprise them, okay? So those are the 2 different types of executes, and I'm going to show specific nades after I talk about each role on T side. All right, so let's talk about specific roles. So the first role I'm going to talk about is the B player. And so as the B lurk, right, let's think about what I just mentioned with the types of executes that you want to have happen. Where do you need to be as the B anchor to let your team come and do this successfully, right? It's going to be hard if you sit in this position for the whole round, right? Because you don't know if the CTs are playing here or here or, all these different angles, right? You don't know. So as a B player, it's your job to gauge whether you can take this control from the other team and live, okay? So a way to do that very easily is you come here and you see this wire cable routing right here, right? You just walk and you throw smoke like this, okay? And what this smoke does is it used to be better in CSGO, but arguably it's still very good in CS2. What you're trying to do is see over this smoke, okay? And what this allows you to do is if a CT decides to walk down here, it's very hard for him to kind of guess where you're going to be and fight this headshot angle, right? And so if a CT sees this smoke, most of the times he's not going to want to come down. And that's based on his kind of internal risk metric on whether he wants to go down or not based on this smoke, right? Some people will, some people won't. But you have to remember is that this puts a lot of pressure on the CTs to not come down the stairs. What this allows you to do is say, okay, you can say this in your head, right? Okay, I have the control here. I'm going to walk up and I can play in a spot like this. I call this Hobbit. And so this is a spot where very hard for the CTs to successfully clear you, right? If they get lucky, they can clear you. But this is a very hard spot for the CTs to fight. And what you're doing is you're giving your team more space to walk in and do an execute from, okay? And as the B player, what I want you to be thinking about is how the other player that you're facing directly, who's going to be usually the B anchor, is playing, okay? So once you start playing against higher level opponents, a lot of them are going to come here, and if they don't think that you're coming up, they'll throw mollies on the ground like this, right? They'll come in. It's so awkward with this red line. They'll throw mollies that land. Come on. I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. They land more deep like this, okay? So this molly might put out your smoke in weird ways. It might land like this and stuff, and it's gonna just mess with you, all right? What I'm trying to say is maybe they might not do specifically this, but you need to be thinking about how the other player is playing and what their tendencies are as a player, okay? It's very important that you're kind of having this one-on-one battle at B site, trying to figure out what they're gonna do. What I don't want you to do is to full wide swing this, because if you lose your team a 1v1, let's say the B player gets fed up with your antics and he's tired of you rushing and he comes here and he just destroys you, right? You've put your team now in a bad spot because you're in a man disadvantage, and it's very hard to win man disadvantages. The best pro teams in the world win 75-80% of these rounds just flat out because they can play the trade game. They can go 1-for-1, 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 and then now it's 1 versus 0, and you lose the round just because of this opening pick. It gives your team such a bad start. So don't play in a way where you're scared to die, right? Obviously, this has a risk involved, right? Playing behind your smoke here does have risk involved. You could, have some random flash play happen to you and you could die early, right? You're never going to live 100% of the time. But the point is you're trying to play in that kind of risk-averse / what can I get away with type of playstyle as the B player, okay? So not too aggressive, not too passive, just right in the middle, Goldilocks zone. And think about it, I mentioned earlier that the B player is akin to the Palace / ramp player on Mirage. If you're constantly walking out Palace and dying early for no reason on Mirage, your team's going to flame you and they're going to swear at you in Russian, right? They're not going to be happy at you. Same thing at B. It's just people have played so much more Mirage that they know it's a bad play. People on Vertigo, they might not understand why you're dying, but it's most likely somewhat your fault if you're dying a lot playing the B Lurker. It took me like 7 seconds to say B Lurker. I don't know why it couldn't come to my head. Anyways, okay, let's move on. Okay, so the next role is the mid player, and the mid player should be playing even more passively than the B anchor if you want to play in a more structured and safe manner. Okay, so I'll say this first about the mid player. This is a spot where you're also one-on-one against somebody playing mid on CT side, but a lot of the times people will not be playing properly in mid. They'll be either really aggressive or not doing enough. And you only start to play against people who really make you scared in mid to walk out when you start playing against really high-level players or professional players who know what they're doing, right? So what I want you to do as the mid player, if you're solo queuing or you're in like kind of a low level, is I want you to try to noob farm with your team. Okay, what do I mean by that? If you think that the other player in mid is playing poorly and isn't doing things that will stop you from doing whatever you want in mid, right? Tell your team to come mid with you and just win the round flat out, okay? Now, what are the signs that a CT is playing properly in mid? First is a molly here almost every single round, okay? If the other team is mollying like this, in the proper way, right? It's going to be hard to, rush mid, okay? Especially with pistols. Because it means that this player is actually playing in a way that to counter rush, and that's a good thing for him. So you can check that off the list if the other player is doing that. The second thing I want you to look for is if the other player is throwing nades that land in mid. And this is very easy. You can just look at it and see if the nade is coming. And all this means is that you just have to tell your team when you want to go mid, hey, be careful, he nades. Because if your teammates walk here with no comms, that is exactly what the CT wants when he's trying to get this nade off, right? Is to just get people who aren't paying attention. And so that nade can do, 45 damage to somebody who's just walking here, right? Trying to contact out. If he does it properly, it can destroy you. So those are two things I want you to watch for specifically as this player. Generally, as the mid player, your responsibility is to be alive in the late rounds so that you can link up with your teammates as an extra man. There's almost no set nades that you're going to throw at the start of the round playing mid. You can maybe get away with throwing a nade like this and it bounces here and like maybe catches them off guard, right? You can throw those nades, but I would generally recommend to not do that. Your goal being here, staying alive, is to hold the mid push, okay? Because if nobody is holding this push and somebody walks all the way down here, this is a problem for your team. Because now, remember what I said before I started talking about the roles, this player now knows that no one can come from mid, right? There's no option for the T's to do that. So it has to be a full execute from either the ramp or from B stairs, okay? It can't be a split. So it gives the CTs a lot of time and focus on certain areas and they don't have to think about mid at all. So I want you to always be present in some way holding mid. So you can hold it like this. This is a really sweaty way I like to hold it because you can see this sliver right here. It's just like a pixel angle. The guy will walk past and he'll change the color here, right? So you'll see him walk past. Maybe you can even peek him if you have your gun out, right? Holding like this. Boom. You can hold from here, right? This is an off angle that's hard to clear because, when you think about average player, he's just going to go like, oh, no one's here, right? And, you're holding from this angle, right? You're playing against better opponents, though. If they peek this and don't see anything, they're going to hard clear this. So just be ready for people who are good to know about this angle, okay? But this is a good angle to farm silvers in, honestly. And also, if you think that the other team really doesn't like to push mid, you can also just switch it up if you're like bored of going bottom mid every round, right? And just run up the ladder. You just go up like this. Or you can do the silent climb. which is where you just spam AD. It's just like walking up the ladder, except, you know, it's much faster. You can hold from here. This is a very strong angle to hold mid from, because if people start walking through, it's very hard to clear this angle. Like if they're coming like this, it's very hard, you know, I'm like exposed to it the entire time if I'm like just a little bit too far forward, okay? This is a very strong angle I like to hold from. And then personally, I don't play this position, and I'm not IGLing a team, so I don't know these nades, but there are pro players who throw nades from... Wait, maybe I do know them. Ah, I found it, okay. So come here. You can throw this nade too if you're bored. Aim right here, so I'm lining up with here. And I see this door right in the middle here. Do a simple jump throw. This will help your team when they go away. Okay, this is more advanced, but, you know, if you want to throw some nades, just throw some nades. Like, it can't hurt. Okay, then remember, like I said earlier, it's your role to link up with your team for the late round. So you're going to have your smoke and your nade. So your smoke is going to have very high impact in the late round. So wherever your team is going, you can link up with them. This is for you to experiment with, but just remember as this player, you don't want the CT to forget about you existing, okay? So you're going to have to maybe take a little bit of risk to just remind the CT by peeking and, you know, maybe like peeking out here. Oh, you don't see anybody? Okay. Clear the boost. Like maybe just like throwing a flash, right? Or something. You just want this guy to not play the whole game thinking, okay, they never lurk mid and they never split, so I'm just going to, you know, fuck mid. I'm just going to look at B, right? You have to remind this guy that you're there because it splits his focus. It makes him think that a B split might be coming. Or like, you know, it might not actually be A because there was a guy mid earlier, right? Like very recently, you know? Just remember, as the mid lurk, you're trying to mess with the CT who's playing CT across from you in mid. Okay, now I'm going to talk about A. This is where people kind of hate Vertigo because Vertigo is very boring strike, okay? You just want to kind of go to sleep on T side because the things that CTs can do to you on A, if you go early, are so annoying that most T sides, if you ever watch a professional game, you'll see them just sitting bottom ramp in forklift doing nothing. Okay, they'll just be like, they'll throw like one smoke, one molly, and then they'll just sit AFK. And the reason for that is A site has so many little things that the CTs can do, right? The CTs can smoke yellow. They can smoke ramp. They come here and they flash off the wall, right? And they kill anybody who's like running up at them, right? The CTs will start and they'll be like mollying here. Or they'll be mollying from here, right? There's so much annoying stuff that the CTs can do to you that usually if you're playing against people who you respect and you know that they're just going to crop you if you hold W at them, like any pro player or any high level FACEIT player, most people are going to opt to just kind of sit AFK in forklift and then go later into A, okay? With that being said, if you think the other team is bad and you think that they can't handle getting peeked, right? Feel free to hold W at A and call your team with you, okay? I'm not saying you can't do that. I play matchmaking games where I just literally hold W up the ramp and the other team is like knife out on the site, right? Matchmaking games, you can absolutely hold W. But once you start getting into better games, and I talked about this in my last video, about, you know, a fish only grows as big as the aquarium he's put in, right? If you're only playing against matchmaking players who never challenge you, you're only ever going to get good at like, farming matchmaking players. You're never going to actually get good against things that are hard to play against. What pro players have realized is that the things that are hard to play against on Vertigo are really hard to play against at A, and they're really CT-sided at A ramp if you go early. So just keep that in mind in all of this stuff regarding ramp early on T side, okay? So as this player, you have to be ready to throw a few nades for your team at the start to block information from the CTs, just to not let them have full control of everything. So a good smoke to throw, I don't know if there's a name for this, but a lot of people call this the key smoke, and this one was kind of bad because it still gives this gap here. But this smoke, what it does is it blocks off so many sight lines from the CTs, right? If they're playing back here or down on the ramp, they have no information whether or not you're walking up inside this smoke, okay? So it puts a lot of pressure in their minds that you could be anywhere behind the smoke if they're playing from here, okay? And even if they swing like this, they can't see anything, right? And so even if you don't throw the smoke, it's really good to know how to molly into Ivy like this or into gap. And this one went kind of deep. You can just kind of throw it like this. And that's a bit better. I wanted to land kind of like right on top of it. Yeah, that's better. Just like in this general area. And so what you're trying to do is stop the CT from wide swinging like this on you. Because if there's a good molly, I'll actually try to throw a good one here. This fucking dog shit game. Okay, guys, I'm not this much of a bot, okay? Okay, it took me a few tries. But, you know, you want to molly in this gap area because if a CT wide swings like this, right? and they get 1 kill, they can't fall back. They're gonna die in this Molotov, so they're forced to fight you. Okay, so this CT player wide swinging, he'll get maybe 1 kill if he's lucky and then die. In a 4v4, right, the Ts are advantaged statistically because the CTs don't have enough people to hold everything. Okay, so it's fine for you if you die and you get tilted, whatever. Just remember that that's good for your team, and it's more likely that you're going to win the game if you win important rounds from people doing stupid stuff like that. Okay, and then as this player, you're not exactly, you could be playing this role in an IGL position, or you might be a pack player, but generally you're going to be a very vocal player on your team, and you're going to have a lot of opinions on like what you want to do in the round because you're so close to all this action. So if you want to call your team to come towards A, that's totally fine. They'll listen to you. You're the one who's closest, and you can call them to just kind of walk up A with you. When you come up A here, there's a lot of angles you have to clear. Like all these little angles are probably the most dangerous against most things, because let's say an Awper is like holding right here, right? If you don't clear this, it's a free kill for him, you know, to get a kill and fall back. So you just have to be ready to walk up and clear all these little things. Okay, like all the way down here, walking up, all the little sandbags, angles, all of this stuff, right? And then remember, you always have to be careful of people boosting. So there might be somebody boosting here. This is the strong boost. I don't know what to really, I don't really have names for this, but this is like the boost here, and then the boost here are very strong. So you just have to be ready for those, right, as you're walking up. And you can call to your team, I don't see them, they might be boosting, right? And that's enough to tell your team like, hey, let's just don't forget about this. It's something important that we need to do. And remember, like I talked about with the paths to the site, you're taking the ramp because it pushes the CTs, in theory, back into this area, right? So now, you know, you have a more open site to get in, right? Obviously, at A, they're going to be, if they're playing back in the site, they have like kind of this one area to worry about, right? They don't have to worry about like getting split on. But the thing is that these angles are so hard to hold in isolation, right? Let's say you wanted to hold side hall, and you did a simple execute, and I'll get to this with these smokes, right? But you did a simple execute, and this guy is here, right? And he's like, oh, I can't hold anything now. If I jump up to try to hold it, look, I'm open to everything, right? So nobody can really do this, right? Unless they're really crazy, and you know, you're gonna like kill them, right? And so you're forcing them back into those kind of bad fights for them. And if they want to take those, then they can when the execute comes in, but you're gonna be ready for them because you watch this video and you're good at the game. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the Awper, and Awping is very similar to the A player, where you're going to start A on most rounds. And before I talk about that, I just want to say, if you have this spawn right here, feel free to go for the B pick, where you just run like this, come up with the Awp, you just crouch peek this angle, and you'll beat the CT here on most times, or you'll meet him right here, like evenly, and you'll be able to get the shot off. Just expect somebody to be here when you go for this pick, okay? You don't necessarily need a flash, but if you're playing in a duo, you can tell your teammate to flash like this. You just come anywhere on here and you aim right here. You see this flash pops perfectly in the window, and anyone who's like looking up here will get full blinded, so that can aid your peek. But you just come here, expect a guy to be there, and you know, go for the shot. Okay, but now the typical round is you'll come here with the op, and what you want to do is you want to think about the previous rounds and what the other team has been smoking. Okay, so there's 3 options for them to smoke. Either they don't smoke at all, right, which is typical in like noob elo, right? They'll smoke the ramp, or they'll smoke yellow, which you probably won't run into unless you're in high elo this smoke. So what you have to think about is like where you can stand to actually see people with the op. So if they're smoking ramp, right, you can see over the ramp smoke, and even though this yellow smoke is kind of conflicting, you can see over it. So anyone peeking on the back, you can just post here. If somebody wants to, you know, be stupid and peek, right, with the ramp smoke, it's a free kill, right? With the op, it is no challenge. Let's say they're smoking yellow. That means that you can come and play angles that are more like wide here, right? If you want to get a little bit more risky, or you can come to Zywoo and just post right here on the op peak. Yes, you are like exposed to these random gaps, but again, most people don't look at these, especially not early in the round. They're more focused on stuff like here. So you're able to come to Zywoo and maybe, you know, surprise somebody who peeks you like this, okay? Generally, you're not going to throw nades at the start because you're more focused on posting with the op because it's so strong. But I want you to learn the nades that the A player throws, because I remember when Shiro was on Cloud9, I remember watching these demos back in the day, he would always throw these nades, right, in the same way that the A player would, you know, maybe like a flash here or something, right? And he would throw these nades to act like he was the A rifler and then link back up with his teammates. So I want you to know the role of what your A player should be doing also in case you have to do it, okay? So the last player is the float player, and this player can go between A, B, and mid, and your goal is to be supporting your teammates in whatever place that you go to, okay? Whether that's with yourself being able to trade or entry frag at A, typically, whether it's to throw nades for your B teammate, like the flash I just showed you in the ops section, or to walk out mid with your teammate and go for a B split instantly. And so as the float player, you have to be thinking about where you're going to have the most impact going early in the round, okay? Because you have to make a decision on where you're going to start. So typically, you'll start towards A because, you know, there's not much to do with random teammates who don't have any plan. They just don't want to say anything. A is your best bet because you can get fights and trade your teammates more easily there and kind of work around based out of A because there's more stuff to do. Okay, so when you go A, like I said, we're playing boring strike here. It's best to just kind of sit here and listen, right, when you're at A, and, you know, maybe come to forklift, and, you know, if your teammate's throwing the smoke for you, you can just kind of walk up with him if you think that, you know, stuff isn't really going to happen to you and you're confident, right? And since you still have your molly, a lot of the times you're going to end up mollying sandbags because, again, when we talk about executes, right, we want to clear out all these angles so they're not a problem. So getting your molly out here, the safest way to do it is you're walking up the ramp, right? You see this little window? You can just left click a molly at this little window. And look at that, it still mollies the sandbags and you don't have to peek it, okay? I was in a game yesterday and somebody threw a molly like this, right? Don't do this. You can just simply walk up here, right? And just left click it and it'll hit every time as long as you can see this window and you're not too far up, okay? And so if you didn't watch the ops section, I'll just show this flash at B. This flash like this, right? You just come to this thing and you aim right at this vent and it'll perfectly flash in the window there. Okay, so a flash that I really like to throw for my team if I want to go mid as the float player is you come into this right here, this doorway, and you see this quadrilateral right here, I'm kind of making with my crosshair. You aim towards the bottom of it and you do a middle click jump throw, and you see where this flash pops, it pops out in mid like this, and anyone who's holding from this angle is going to be blinded, anyone who's holding from here is going to be blinded, anyone who's looking at the box like this will be blinded. This is a great flash to pop mid with and rush with, okay? So this is a trick play that you can use in your matches. It's very simple and it'll catch a ton of people off guard. Okay, last but not least are the basic sight executes, and I'm just going to show a couple nade sets that you can throw with yourself or with a duo, but I'm going to tell you which ones are the most important that you know for in case nobody in your team knows nades, right? You're in super low elo and nobody knows what to do, right? So let's start with A first because it's the simplest. So at A, there's two types of executes, okay? There's executes where you throw smokes that land like this. These are called the close smokes or like the normal smokes, right? Or just let's throw A smokes, right? This is what everybody knows. And then there's also a deeper execute where you smoke elevator and maybe you throw a Molotov that lands hell or lands heaven and you maybe molly this. This is a more advanced execute, but it pushes the CTs back even more, so they have to fight even harder to retake the bomb site, okay? So this is also a very strong execute that you can throw by yourself almost, and you don't have to worry about your team knowing anything, okay? So the most important nade set, I would say, is this one for left side. So you just come into this right here, and you see this bar. It kind of makes like a T here, right? Like this standout bar right here. You just look at this and you jump throw, and it'll smoke left side. And this is good because it doesn't bleed out too much, right? If it bled out a lot, people might be able to run through the smoke, but this one is pretty good. And then if you want to molly side haul for your team, just look right here at this guy and do a middle click throw. Just like that. And then if anybody was playing in here, they're either forced to run at you with a sound cue or fall back and be in the open, okay? The other player on this execute, somebody else is required to throw this smoke, so you just come here on the ramp. You don't want to peek too far because, right, you're exposed to this, so you're going to come up to like this spot, and then you see these numbers right here. You just left click right at that simply, and it smokes the right side. Then while you're in this area, this guy right here, you're going to aim at the bottom right, and this is going to molly off headshot or emo, and it's going to perfectly... I just lagged out. You're going to perfectly cover everything in this area. So this player who might, want to peek up is either forced to, or he's forced to fall back and just play the retake more back here, right, behind the smokes. And I'm not worrying about sandbags on these executes because I'm assuming that you mollied it or you like double naded it or something, right? And the part about the float player, I mentioned that this is a very easy way to molly sandbags. So any player can come and throw this before the execute happens, and it's 100% clear he can't be here, right? If the molly fully goes, he's just going to fully die to it. So I'll talk about pathing for this execute after I mention these nades, because the pathing is very similar on A site. So a very easy way to smoke elevator without having to really think is you come into this corner again. You see this shadow along the bar here? Well, there's a parallelogram right here, right? Just aim at the top right of the parallelogram, and it's going to thread the needle all the way into elevator. Like, that's a very safe way to throw this smoke. I saw some pro players using this before, and it's very effective, so you can throw that. And then to molly heaven, after you throw this smoke, right, you come here, run to this corner. You see this right here, right? You just do a W jump throw at the corner. That's going to perfectly land in heaven, and this is a very, very good Molotov. It blocks off all of heaven, right? It forces him back, and hell, right? It forces him back. And then, just like in the other execute, you can also just throw this molly. It doesn't have to land perfectly. It's going to spread to this guy, most likely, right? It's very hard to, like, dodge this or accidentally not be in the Molotov, so... And you'll hear him, okay? So that's that execute. And to quickly talk about pathing, the pathing isn't so important on these executes, right, to where you like exactly run like is the best possible spot. You just need to remember that somebody has to be playing here, okay? And if you watch Vertigo and you watch Team Spirit, you'll see Donk is like the best player at doing this. He always gets one kill doing this kind of thing. But he is trying to kill people who hide in short, okay? So a lot of the times people on CD side will be playing in this area and they'll try to like sneak into short here, okay? And what they're trying to do is live, because if nobody comes here, they're able to, you know, kill a guy planting the bomb and still be alive. So it's really important that you at least have one person dealing with short, okay? So maybe like he just throws a molly like this, something like that. You know, he like peeks and like deals with short as like a pincer. And so you're not really going to pincer people on site per se. You're going to pincer people in short. If you don't do that, it can be very hard to win around if somebody is, you know, like constantly hiding in here, right? So if you're playing here and like it might feel like you're baiting a little bit, but it's only baiting if you don't do anything, right? So if you come here and get a kill, you're baiting for a reason. You're not just baiting to, you know, be scared and not play the game. Okay, so those are the most basic A side executes. Now let's move over to B. Okay, so we're over here at B site, and B site, I'd say it's a bit more straightforward because the nades kind of fly and like everything is kind of exploding and flashing. And I'd say it's a lot easier to actually go B than it is to go A, because it's just more straightforward, okay? So the nades that I want you to learn, you come into this corner and you crouch, and you see, just look at the tip right here. And if you like are off by a little bit, you're gonna miss the smoke. So you gotta be right at the tip, and then you stand up and you left click throw. And this will smoke off the right side of sight, okay? And then there's a molly from here, I don't remember it. I like this molly, you just come here at the arrow, it's really easy. And you see this yellow mark right here, just throw left click. That's the molly default. You can molly quad just by like run throwing one. You know, it's very hard to miss this. You can molly white too before the execute comes in. You know, you can just like throw one like that. It's gonna spread to white. This guy's going to have to be pushed out, right? You can basically molly every position on the map, right? And force them to play back, okay? And then as this player, if you came here and threw that molly, you can throw a flash in the same spot. Just like that. It's a super good God flash. And then you see, it's hard. There's like high contrast, but there's another yellow mark here. And you can throw a flash like this. And what these flashes do, the first one popped here, the second one popped here. And so these flashes will cover a lot of the angles that people like to play in B site. Like if they're playing here, this flash will destroy them. If they're playing back here, this flash will destroy them, right? So generally I would say just throw first flash, wait a second, second flash, and then just run with your team. Because I don't know why I don't see more people throwing this molly, but if you're like the last one in, you can just come to the top of this ramp here. You see these two bolts, you just kind of aim like at this general area, and then jump throw, and that's going to molly Guardian in a safe way where you don't have to, you know, like wide swing something where you might be forced to like have your gun out when you're swinging like this, right? So you can just throw it to support your team just like this, and I guess you could even throw a nade here too in the same manner. Yeah, that's a good nade. Okay, and so like I outlined at the start, there's two ways to execute B. You don't just have to do it from the stairs. You can do it from mid also, right, where you do a split. And so if you're coming out mid with your team, and you know you clear this kind of stuff and you don't see anybody holding it, this is a telltale sign that the other team is playing super passive. You can simply throw a smoke like this, it's super forgiving, And what this is going to do is if a CT is playing here in elevator, right, they can't see when you're coming up, so their sight is blocked, right, from you running up. So you throw a smoke like that, you throw a molly into elevator, and you can just go. And what you're trying to do is pincer B site with your team. So like they're throwing nades, they're coming up the stairs, and you're trying to find this one guy who might be isolated, right, or not paying attention to you. You know, this guy might be alone, you know, whatever round you're playing, and he can't hold both at the same time, right? So he's just gonna die from a split. And that's when splits can be very strong, is in man advantages, or you know, when you have like full mid control and you're just kind of ready to go. Mid is very good. And you can throw similar nades. I would just not throw the smoke, right? Because this smoke is going to block your teammates who come from here. Like maybe they can't trade because, you know, they can't see over this smoke, right? So maybe forgo the smoke, but you can throw like white Molotov, quad Molotov, default Molotov, molly this, or you can molly everything. So if you have enough players at B, you could throw like 3-4 mollies at everything and just kind of, you know, napalm the bomb site. They have nowhere to play. Okay, so that's my guide on the basics of Vertigo T side. If you like this video and you want to see more, make sure you leave a like on the video and stay subscribed, because I'm going to be making tutorials just like this one for all 7 of the maps, including Dust 2. Again, rest in peace Overpass, they just removed it. And regarding Dust 2 and CT side, I want to give it at least another, you know, like a couple weeks before I start giving my opinions on the map, because things definitely have changed with CS2 coming out. The last time Dust 2 was in the pool was in CSGO, and the map plays in kind of a different way. It's kind of tweaked a little bit, especially with the skybox being so open. So I want to play a few games, you know, like give it maybe like a few weeks to a month, watch a few pro demos, and then I think I'll be ready to give kind of an informed opinion on the map, so I'm not lying to you, okay? This is all stuff that I've used, and it's all advice that I would give to anybody personally. So you guys are lucky that this stuff is free on the internet, alright? That's all I'm trying to say. I wish it was around when I was trying to get good, but you know, it wasn't, so I'm here to make it for you. And yeah, that's all I have for today's video. Peace.